I am suffering from a character crisis. For the last few years, I have only played one fighting game, but with the release of Street Fighter 6, could I be missing out on my soul character? I want to give every character a chance at becoming my main. This week, I learned how to play as Chun-Li, one of Street Fighter's most iconic faces, and someone who I've wanted to learn how to play as for almost a decade. This is a series on my blog and this YouTube channel, so like the video and subscribe if you'd like to join me as I go through my character crisis. Chun-Li is up there with series juggernauts Ken and Ryu as the face of Street Fighter. Chun-Li first appeared in Street Fighter II and was the first playable female character in fighting game history. With the explosion of popularity that Street Fighter II enjoyed, Chun-Li quickly became a mascot for the game. She began her story as a police officer, seeking to avenge the death of her father at the hands of M. Bison. After the events of Street Fighter II, she alternated between teaching students martial arts or coming out of retirement to lay down the law. Chun-Li as a character is someone who has almost always enjoyed being considered high tier or better. In Street Fighter Third Strike, she is even considered to be the best character in the game, and her super is responsible for the iconic Evo Moment 37. In Street Fighter 6, initial impressions of Chun-Li by the pros have her placed in A tier, ranked at just outside of the top 5 in the game. Her long pokes and generally good buttons allow her to be adapted to any style of play and do well at a top level. Street Fighter 6 also gifted her with a new stance, Serenity Stream, expanding her moveset even further. However, Chun-Li has been deemed as one of the most difficult characters to learn. Even the game doesn't recommend newbies start out with her. With that being said, I didn't let that stop me from putting her on my poll to choose my next main. And even though my community may have chosen the most difficult option, little did they know I was already playing as Chun-Li and was hoping they'd vote for her. My introduction to traditional fighting games started with none other than a Street Fighter II arcade cabinet. At the time, I was literally living in the middle of nowhere and had nothing to do. But I was lucky, and there was a Street Fighter cabinet at the local laundromat, and even though by the time I discovered it, Street Fighter II was way past its prime, I quickly learned why that game was so beloved. Chun-Li became my main before I even knew what that term meant, and while I only got to play it for a month, my love of fighting games has persisted ever since. So when I heard that Street Fighter 6 was coming out, I knew that it was time for me to return to the streets. And who better to learn the game with than my first main, Chun-Li. Since this is my first Street Fighter game, I need to cover the basics. If you want to skip to the guide on Chun-Li specifically, or straight to the tournament report, timestamps will be in the description. Street Fighter is a traditional 2D fighter, and follows different rules than what you may expect in something like Smash. Instead of a single button and a directional input determining what move comes out, Street Fighter features 6 buttons for attacking, 3 punches and 3 kicks, ranging from light, medium to heavy. On top of this, Street Fighter also features special moves, which are accessed by performing inputs that are unique to each character. A classic example of this is Ryu's Hadouken, which is performed with a quarter circle forward input while timed with a punch. If you find these inputs difficult to execute, you can instead opt for modern controls, which offer one-button specials and supers, which is great for getting the move out quickly, but nerfs the amount of damage you'll be dishing out. Blocking, perhaps the most fundamental aspect of every fighting game, is achieved by holding backwards. Unlike Smash, which has it bound to a specific button, the act of blocking in Street Fighter and many other traditional fighting games means that you are unable to move forward. Approaching is a commitment. It means you must drop your guard if you want to advance. Choose your moments to approach and capitalize on your opponent's mistakes by attacking them when they move forward. This aspect of Street Fighter is known as footsies and is essential to understanding the push and pull of the genre. Street Fighter 6 introduces a new mechanic in the series called Drive Gauge. These 6 bars underneath your health are your drive gauge, and understanding them is essential to pushing your character to the limits. There are several different ways to use the drive gauge. Drive Impact gives you a powerful attack that lets you get hit 2 times before the move breaks, but if your opponent reacts with their own drive impact, the ensuing combo from your opponent will give you plenty of time to think about your mistakes. Another way to use drive gauge is with overdrive moves. By performing a special input with 2 buttons instead of 1, you'll get a move that uses up some of your meter, but is either faster, stronger, or can combo better. But if you run out of meter, you enter burnout state, which makes the game much, much harder. If you'd like to learn more about these systems and how they all work together, I'll include some links in the description for anyone who might be interested in taking the plunge into Street Fighter 6. Chun-Li is not an easy character to start with if you are brand new to traditional fighting games. She has 2 unique mechanics to her that on their own would be enough to dissuade new players from trying her out. But I'm a man of the people, and I wasn't going to let that stop me from playing a character I liked. The first and most important mechanic to understand with Chun-Li is charge inputs. In order to execute a move with a charge input, you first have to hold in a specific direction for a certain amount of frames before you gain access to that move. Charge inputs are the core mechanic behind Chun-Li's fireballs, which are important tools to any character who has them. Charge inputs can be tricky to understand, as you have to learn how long you need to hold back before flicking the stick forward and timing it with a button press. Mistime your charge input, and you'll just be fighting ghosts from across the screen. The other mechanic to learn for Chun-Li is Serenity Stream, an alternate stance that gives Chun-Li access to even more moves than every other character in the cast. By performing a quarter circle back punch, you can enter this stance. While this isn't a difficult technique to learn on its own, when added in combination with the rest of Chun-Li's kit, this move adds even more complexity to the character. While learning how to perform all the moves in your character's kit is a major part of learning a new character, what's more important is how to fight as the character. Chun-Li has several advantages over the rest of the roster that make her a strong choice for a main. She has some of the longest range pokes in the game, with crouching medium kick and standing heavy punch. Her fireball game, combined with the fastest anti-air move in Tensho kicks, gives her excellent command of the neutral. Keep your opponents at leg's length and punish them anytime they step a little too close. Let's see if I'm able to put this into practice when I enter my first Street Fighter tournament. Picking up Chun-Li was, of course, a little challenging. I wasn't just learning how to play as a new character, I was also learning how to play Street Fighter. While I do have some experience in traditional fighters, thanks to playing a little bit of Guilty Gear with my friends, learning Street Fighter was still an uphill battle. I tried to do some ranked matches, and even though I have a lot of fighting game experience, I still lost every single one of my placement matches. One thing I especially struggled with was learning how to cancel my moves into special inputs. In Street Fighter, some moves can be cancelled, which lets you end the move's animation immediately and go into a special. I just couldn't get the timing down for this, and it didn't help that I was trying to do this with classic controls. I decided to switch to modern controls, even though I thought that modern Chun-Li was worse than classic Chun-Li at the time. Turns out, modern Chun-Li is actually really good, but we didn't know that in the West. Making this switch meant I had to perform less inputs to put out a special move, which gave me a better sense of the timing I needed to cancel my moves. After playing on modern for a bit, I was able to switch back to classic controls and finally land my combos. I even got my first perfect during this time, which felt amazing. But before I knew it, it was time to enter the tournament, and despite having only played Street Fighter for a little over 10 hours, it was time to put those skills to the test. Round 1 winners. Nocturne. My first opponent was a Zangief player, a character who, even though I should do well against, I still struggle fighting since I didn't have the best grasp of the controls. My game plan was simple: don't let him in. Zangief is a grappler, and deals massive damage every time he lands a grab, but if I never give him the chance to do that, I should be fine. I stick to my game plan for the first round, and use my fireballs to keep him far away. Because of this, I end up pushing myself to the corner, which means I could get drive impacted and take massive damage. I managed to react to his drive impact with my own, to win the trade, and eventually the round. I get excited after that first round though, and end up cornering myself from being too aggressive. He then wins the next few rounds, and before I know it, he only needs one more win to take the set. I managed to throw out a super in response to a drive impact, to keep it close and take the round instead. With my winner's life on the line, I play the best footsies I can, trying to avoid Nocturne. However, in the end, he catches me mashing, and with a level 3 super dealing massive damage to me, he finally takes the set 2-0 over me. Round 2 losers. Onyx. For my next opponent, I got to play every fighting game player's least favorite matchup. the mirror. When you play the mirror, it's not just the tournament that's on the line, it's also your pride. This set was also played on stream, putting even more pressure on us to prove who the better Chun-Li was. One of the commentators knew about my Character Crisis series, and had this to say.
So Tuesday-tastic is doing a YouTube series where every 2 weeks he switches characters based on a poll, and he's not a Street Fighter player, so he is a ballsy individual.
We started off playing very patiently in our first round, trading pokes and fireballs. In fact, we were so patient that the game ended up going to time. In Smash, we get a 7-minute timer, so when my opponent stole the lead with 8 seconds left on the clock, I wasn't ready to get the comeback. Losing a round doesn't mean that the game is over though. I win round 2, and carry that momentum into the next round, and keep Onyx cornered long enough to get a huge lead. With one final lightning kicks, I'm able to take the first game. Game 2, Onyx takes the first round, but I fire back with a huge combo that carries him to the corner, eventually leading me to winning the round.
Wake up EX Fireball, then the low into the super very nice. He's not even on monitor controls too! Let's go Tuesday!
Onyx turns it up, however, and brings it to a Game 3.
It's 1-1, great. Tuesday's still in this. I am very impressed by what I'm seeing right now from the Smasher. Let's go, Tuesday Tastic.
That is true. He is also playing a Switch Pro controller. Yeah, that's a good shout.
Oh, I didn't even notice that.
I do my best, but Onyx is playing really well by this final game, and wins the set over me 2-1.
Final results.
I had no idea what to expect at my first Street Fighter tournament. I have been entering tournaments for a very long time, but only for Super Smash Bros. Entering a tournament for a game that I was brand new to was intimidating. But even though I only had a couple of hours invested into Street Fighter, going to my local tournament was absolutely the best thing I could have done. I may have only gone 0-2, but results don't paint the full picture. I managed to take a round off each opponent I fought, and even a game against someone who probably had put a lot more time into Street Fighter than me. I learned a lot, and was able to get to meet people in the scene and make new friends. If you've never been to your local tournament, I'd highly recommend giving it a shot. Going to this tournament also gave me the opportunity to recognize some flaws in my gameplay. Special moves are almost always not safe on block, but I was mashing them out every time I could simply because I wanted to cancel my other moves. I need to be more aware of when my opponent blocks my moves and hold off on canceling too much. Another thing I could work on is implementing more drive rush, since that is an option that I wasn't using that would elevate my gameplay to the next level. But as much fun as Chun-Li was, there are still tons of other Street Fighter characters that I want to learn how to play. And you get to decide who I play next. You can vote for my next character in the poll that is linked down below. And be sure to comment what character you'd like to see next, as my Character Crisis has just begun. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on Tuesday.